Hello and welcome to the first session of our third virtual volunteer series. My name is Maidna and I'm the president and co-founder of the Touch of Life Foundation.
Hello, my name is Kushan and I am the co-founder of the Touch of Life Foundation.
Before we start our first session, we want all of you to get to know more about the Touch of Life Foundation. The Touch of Life Foundation is a student-led nonprofit, a 501c3 organization with a vision to help rescue and protect underprivileged women and children from exploitation, labor, and trafficking. Today, we will go over an introduction to child labor, as well as the different types of trafficking, how trafficking affects the economy, how victims are affected mentally, not just physically, the rehab process once a child has been rescued, and life after they've been rescued.
Imagine if you were taken from your parents and being sold on the black market, people bidding on you and you not having any say in what you want, where you'll go, or what you'll be required to do. Now imagine you have been sold to the highest bidder and you're forced to go work 12 hours a day with insufficient food, 5 hours of sleep, no change of clothes, and no free time. This child should have been in school and playing with their friends on the soccer field. Not that they get beaten if they made a mistake or they do not work fast enough. They are deprived of food and they cry for their parents. This is not the only nightmare for the child, but a nightmare for our society.
What is child trafficking? According to the United Nations, human trafficking is the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of people through force, fraud, or deception, with the aim of exploiting them for profit. Men, women, and children of all ages and from all backgrounds can become victims of this crime, which occurs in every region of the world. The traffickers often use violence or fraudulent employment agencies and fake promises of education and job opportunities to trick and coerce their victims.
What is child labor? Child labor often utilizes trafficked kids. Child labor is exploitation of a child that deprives them the basic right to freedom, education using force, fraud, or coercion. This means they cannot attend school and the work they do can be dangerous to their health. According to UNICEF, approximately 60% of trafficked children are working in agriculture such as farming, dairies, forestry, and fisheries. Approximately 25 work in the service industry such as prostitution, restaurants, domestic work, deliveries, and trash. Another 15 work in mines, factories, and manufacturing.
Child trafficking is more prevalent than we think. The next two slides will show you a few frightening facts about child trafficking. Approximately 51% of trafficked victims in the US were children in 2018. People generally picture only adults getting trafficked, but more than 50% of victims trafficked are children, and they are deprived of their freedom and education. Trafficking is over a $150 billion industry and is the third largest illegal trade internationally. 2 out of every 3 children trafficked are girls, and about 71% of juvenile arrests are girls. About 79% of trafficking victims are sexually exploited. This could be in prostitution, pornography, or on the other side while doing work. About 18% of trafficking victims are forced into labor. Usually, we picture women as more trustworthy than men, so we usually do not suspect a woman of trafficking, but 30% of traffickers are women. They are actually running the trafficking ring, or they recruit others.
Around 50,000 people are trafficking to the US every year. We always feel like the US is safe and do not usually picture the US as being such a huge importer of trafficked victims. Around 700,000 people are trafficked across international borders each year.
This is a common misconception. Girls make up the majority of trafficked victims involved in sex work, but boys are also at risk. Boys are often trafficked for sex tourism.
Victims often know and trust the trafficker. The trafficker could be a boyfriend posing to be interested and they lure their victims. It could also be a family member, a member of the community, or even a teacher. If you feel something is not right or are feeling uncomfortable, tell a trusted adult.
Trafficking can occur anywhere. Traffickers target victims in malls, on the street, and often online. In fact, since COVID, traffickers have used online chats, social media, and even video games to get access to young children in safety of their own homes, posing as children themselves. They can arrange a time and place to meet their victims.
Traffickers prey on anyone vulnerable, not just undocumented people. Even victims who are legal in a country are often tricked into situations where are given false promises of education, money, or work. The traffickers will then take all their legal documents, such as passports, licenses, identification, and money away so the victim cannot leave.
The US Department of State estimates that 14,500 to 17,500 people are trafficked into the United States each year. The US is a big importer of trafficked victims. Trafficking in the US also exports victims as well.
Some trafficked victims are physically restrained from leaving, but most trafficking victims may have been threatened or emotionally coerced into the situation and are too scared to leave or feel that like they have no place to go. Others are convinced by the traffickers that they will get in trouble with law enforcement if they leave.
Although traffickers often use physical abuse to control their victims, mental manipulation is almost always used. Many victims are conceived to believe that they have done something wrong or they deserve what is happening to them.
As mentioned earlier, trafficking involves three elements: recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of person. We'll be going over the different ways victims are recruited in the next few slides. Second is by the means of threat, force, coercion, or other illegal means. And then the third is for the purpose of sexual exploitation, forced labor, or other illegal things.
Traffickers use manipulation to catch victims of trafficking. They visit families that are vulnerable and trick them into thinking these strangers are giving their child a good life, but in reality, they're going to be forced to work for little to no pay. Once these kids are taken away from their family, they don't see them again.
Many times, a trafficker might pose as a boyfriend or girlfriend and buy the victim's trust by getting them items they might not be able to normally get or afford.
Another way people are trafficked is by threatening families. The traffickers will threaten families if they do not send their child to do forced labor. These families do not have protection, so they are forced to work. Otherwise, their whole family will be harmed. The trafficker can also threaten a victim, saying if they do not do what the trafficker wants, they will hurt their family. So, out of fear, the victims listen to the trafficker.
This could be a boss, teacher, coach, or even an elder person in the victim's life. We generally look up to someone and follow the direction of people in authority, but if someone is asking you to do something that does not really feel right, go to someone you trust.
Abduction is one way victims are trafficked. Although it is not the most common way it happens, this can happen in generally crowded places such as malls, rest stops, and train stations.
Another way of trafficking is when the parents sell their child to traffickers so they are forced to work. That happens more often in regions of the world where the parents do not work.
There are multiple reasons why people are trafficked. Prostitution, organ trafficking, debt bondage, street crime, forced marriages, sexual abuse, drug trade, forced labor, and child soldiers are some of the more common types of trafficking. We will get into more details about the types of trafficking in our next virtual volunteer session. For this week's project, please create a poster or flyer with information about human trafficking or child labor to spread awareness. The flyer shown on the slide was a poster made by one of our previous virtual volunteers. Please submit your poster on the Google Classroom underneath the First Week tab.
Please scan the QR code displayed displayed on the screen to take this week's quiz. All of the results will be recorded and the passing grade is an 85%.
Thank you all so much for joining this week's session. We look forward to seeing you guys next week.